Okay. Let's get this started. Whoa, Grumpy. It's a good start. Thank you very much for the raid. Have a great day. Appreciate that. Okay. Challenge when you raid and run. Can't really ask questions. So welcome in. Whoever's joining me. Hope you're well today. I am starting my day by trying to get my user invitation system up and running. Get some tests written. So the goal right now is to test that I can create an invite. Hi, Graham. How you doing? No, you have a great day. No, you have a great day. Have a great day. It's a demand. It's not an actual request. Um, I'm glad Grumpy dragged you here. I appreciate you being here. I hope there wasn't too much kicking and screaming. So I am working on right now, trying to get my user invitation system up and running. The idea is I want to onboard new users. I don't want to. I'm using Auth0 for my user system, which means I don't get to. I have to set a password with everything. I'm trying an experiment this week with the dogs being able to move around with me. They're eating something. Mojo, good morning. So basically, what I'm doing right now is I am going to, when I add the user to the system, I'm going to trigger an invitation, which then they're going to be able to follow a link and set their password, and that will allow them to confirm the account in Auth0. So I won't create an Auth0 user until they confirm, which actually makes sense. Where did you get? They'll eat anything, I swear. No, no. I got one that likes to sit underneath my feet and one that likes to sit behind my chair. Okay. So yeah, the goal here, I was rethinking this yesterday. So what I'm going to do is in my create invite, I'm going to create the invitation, and that's going to trigger a domain event, which will then actually send the invitation. So only when I actually commit to the database will it actually send the invitation. It's a little bit. I'm questioning it a little bit because it is. I was watching the video that someone posted in our Discord yesterday. It was a talk with Greg Young from 2013, and he was talking about magic. And I realized that I've often rallied again. I don't like magic. I like to understand how things are working. But yeah, it's this is a little bit of magic because what's going to happen is I'm going to create the user. I create the user, then I'm going to create an invitation for that user, and then I'm going to basically publish a domain event that says the invitation was created, and the act of the knowing the invitation was created will trigger the piece to actually do the actual send to the user. So it's actually, I'm not really inviting the user here. I'm creating a record in a table and reacting to that insert. So it doesn't feel, it feels a little disconnected, but it feels correct from the system design. So what I need to test here is I need to have a repository, private I repository of user invitation. Yeah. So because we don't have other repositories, right? I stay capitalized on these just because it reads a little easier from the code perspective. So in the arrange, I'm gonna do a substitute for that. And then what I want to test is that repository. Yeah, whatever it is. I want to verify the repository got received. Second. It's a whole new world of trying to trust that the dogs aren't destroying everything I own. And when they're in a room surrounded by thousands of video games, that scares me more. So my apologies. So basically what I need to validate here is that this is a user invitation and that it is for the person I invited it for. And I.code. So the code is going to be generated randomly, not string.is nor empty code, right? I don't validate anything else. This invite user command needs to be invited by user ID, right? So we need, it's not just good enough to know the user we're inviting to the system. We need to know who did it. That'll be a good audit point later on. There's no way that that isn't demanded later on, or who added this user, or who invited this user. Okay, so we don't get the call because we haven't set that up yet, which is okay. The test doesn't pass, so now let's go and we need that in there. We need an I repository of user invitation in here. Repository. So because I try and make these handlers one-to-one with the thing that they're talking about, so there's very little the repository is often the only repository. It should be the only repository because I'm dealing with one thing. I would like to see a high-level design of this. The best diagrams I have for this are this. You mean that? Gilgamesh? Hello, by the way. I mean, if you have any questions, thoughts, opinions on what I'm doing, you're more than welcome to share. I'm happy to talk about this stuff. Yes, but more technical from a technology perspective. The specific technologies, or Like what are you interested in seeing? I don't do diagrams very well, so I diagram the way that I think about things rather than trying to worry about specifics. So I can point and but I'm happy to talk about it if you're interested in knowing more. Like what sort of detail do you wanna see, basically? I mean, this is kind of general design rather than, I mean, it's not necessarily low level. Um, Low level, yeah, would be getting into the actual technologies, and um, the problem is that's a little harder to. I don't quite know how to represent that, but I'm happy to walk through the pieces and describe them, and I can try building something out as we talk if you have specific questions. Again, the stream isn't about me. Um, the stream isn't about me getting the code done. It's about being able to, you know, demonstrate what I'm doing and talk about it if needed. So details about how do you guys start writing classes and different features? Quite sure I follow that. Let me Mr. Jones, good day. How are you doing? So the way this generally works, actually I need a sky draw. Not doing bad. Not doing bad. Create new drawing. Why? Why do you always go into that mode? Dark mode. Blue. A 2-hour webinar on accessibility. Yeah, I go get some. Um, um, get out of my pocket, dog. No, you're not having the tissue. I swear this dog loves paper. He's sticking his nose in my pocket. Um, Go lie down, bud. You okay? Um, let's have a look. Let's think about how I want to turn this now. Um, uh, okay, so let's go to typical execution for a second. So Gilgamesh, as you, if you have any more questions, any specific questions to go along, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna diagram kind of the pieces and the technologies at each stage here in a typical flow. So I start with API endpoint, right? And the API endpoint technology I'm using is, wow, I can't spell today. Fast endpoints. So my entry, is there. What I then use is I send a command through mediator. So, you know, so let's be consistent here. So I send a command using mediator library. And that command could be um, um, create new widget dot command. The way that the classes are structured is a command. I generally wrap in a single class, which is actually the name of the overall command and the process. I then create a command record, which is the data that I'm going to pass into this, and then the handler for that. Mediator does the wire up, so it knows that this goes to this. When I say send this command, it knows that this is the receiver of that command. That then executes that. Within here, Um, this might just be a terminating thing. This might just store directly to database. Um, this might actually have a side effect. So if it just, ultimately, from the way this is going, this will, oh, this will store. No, forgot which tool I was in then. This will store straight to the database, but it also could create some domain events, right? So, um, domain events could be, that's also a mediator. Those are mediator notifications. These domain events could be, i.e., new widget was created, right? And then I can subscribe to that notification. Um, Subscription mediator, still in mediator technology. Hey Dota, how you doing? And from there, what I'll do is I'll actually publish. In most cases, when I've got some information there, I'll publish in a domain event. I'll publish an integration event. So this would be publish integration event, and that's Kafka. So now that sends that event out to the wider system. Right. I mean, if I'm doing this, uh, something ARIA tags. If you say that during the accessibility presentation, you'll be having a whole new presentation on HR and sensitivity. So I would, I'd be careful there. Um, so generally, that's actually the flow. From an API right through to the database to the eventing that happens. There is that. Yeah. I'm actually trying to predict the window at this point of which you'll mention that. It's kind of a game I'm playing now. Everyone's getting in these acronyms now. So yeah, so Gilgamesh, if you have any specific questions about um, after this, how do you decide which classes you need and modularize them for usability? So generally, what I'm doing is I'm not trying to think about reusability up front. I'm trying to think about the actual use case I'm chasing. So I'm grouping these based upon general concepts right now. So I'm not really creating a microservice architecture. This is more of a modular monolith. The behavior here for creating a user or registering a new user. So registering a new user, registering a new tenant. So that's actually register a new organization if I'm being accurate, because it's an organization is more than just the tenant. Um, so I'm kind of considering, okay, well, where does the behavior live? And I start at that piece. So, and the command is meant to be understandable. It's meant to be readable. Um, I'm very focused on that whole single responsibility thing. So a handler should at most do one thing. Now, again, there's side effects to it because each handler, as it creates its its entity, invite user, etc., it could trigger domain events. So there is side effects, um, which depending on how hard you focus on certain aspects of, clean code and things, that could be deemed bad. But I think it's a useful technique and it's a useful mechanism because if I put the events inside of the actual handler, um, I mean, I need to represent that a little bit better. This needs to be that. This needs to be. This needs to be handler. Green. Um, After this, how do you? I created an ecom app and added features as required. Not now it's so laggy. Request went from 3 seconds to 15 seconds. Maybe need whole rewrite. Now what you want to do is sit in the filth, not create. Um, from an experience perspective, there, do you understand what's making it laggy, or is it just the fact that you've dumped so many features in? Like, do you understand where the lagginess is happening? Not necessarily. It could be the amount of work you're doing. It could be database. Database is an easy one to look at if your schema's slow. That sounds like a grumpy phrase, by the way, Delta. Thank you for the luck, Mr. Jones. Go get that coffee. You should do. DB and redundant code. So one of the things I've focused very much, um, yeah, one of the things I've focused very much on as I've gone through is trying to, if I look at any command, and I'm not entirely settled on how I'm going to lay out commands, etc. right now. I've tried to make these very simple, so they all pretty much follow pattern. Beyond just being command handler. So for this, I'm registering a user, right? Which actually isn't correct. I'm actually creating create user, right? I'll worry about the naming afterwards. It is create user because I'm actually creating the record. I'm not registering anything, right? Registration suggests the process around this is actually registering the user, right? Um, but I'm going to see if the user exists. If they don't exist, if they do exist already, I return their ID. Otherwise, I create the user and return their ID, right? So they're very much following, you know, I'm trying to be as simple as possible and associate the user with tenant. Does it already exist? If it does, return success because it doesn't matter. If not, let's create that association, right? So I'm very much breaking down the system into these. Where I have to call many of these, I've kind of cheated a little bit and create these use cases or workflows, depending on what I term them today. Where this one is register new user, right? So this is actually the register new user, where registering a user involves getting the tenant, registering the user. Again, that should be create user, and then associating that user with the tenant. And I'm trying to be explicit with my naming so that it's clearer. If your code's got lots of redundant code, it might be worth just doing some basic refactoring and cleaning up those levels to remove that dead code. Identify large methods that can be broken down, and cleaned up and removed that redundant code. If you've not got unit tests in there, it might be a good time to figure out how unit tests get involved so that you can actually try and write some unit tests before you do the refactoring and then validate you've still got the same behavior afterwards. As for the DB is slow. You could run profiles depending on which one it is and which tools you have available. If you've got SQL Server, then there's profiling tools available that will allow you to identify a lot of the things that are slowing you down. So it might be just adding a few indexes could actually improve your response time by 50% again. It could be you being too reserved on some things. You're saving a lot of information you don't need to save that you could delete. So it might be that you just need to archive off a lot of information, and that cuts your speed down, or improves your speed, not cuts it down. So when I'm developing stuff here, I'm thinking about the use case, and I'm really thinking about just the flow through the actual system. And I've got a very simplified path through. It can cope with more complicated requirements. Overall, the way this works is, so this is the element I'm in right now. Oh, no, I'm in tenant management right now because I'm doing user. Everything to do with the user, everything to do with the things that live in the tenant are going to be in this system. They produce events. These are the things that get produced right now. I'm going to remove this layer, I think, ultimately, and just kind of indicate that they publish entities. These are integration events. Actually, let's do that now. Rather than say I'll do it later, let's actually do it. I've got a version of this. Because ultimately what this is integration events, right? What? And those integration events are consumed by Kafka, or they're published into Kafka and consumed. And what it gives me is a lot of I forgot to do that. A lot of flexibility here, so my system can grow and I can actually build out the pieces I need. Why can't I make those arrows after the fact? That's not fun. But either way, it gets the point across. It is more that direction. Mm. Yeah. Actually, I don't need multiple arrows there, do I? I just need that. So when I publish an object, an entity, when I've modified an entity in this database, right? These are different databases. They could be different schemas. We kind of gone through that before. There's no reason I could pick and choose. But the entity is stored in here as quickly as possible without us with only the business logic that it cares about, and then the rest of the system can pick it up and do whatever it needs to do. So things like, are there any changes happens outside of this? It just cares about what's the current state of the entity. I do the changes comparison later, and I think that's I'm not going to regret that so far from what I've looked at. And yeah, this is yeah. to test. And if there's anything specific I can answer or you want to, ask about, you're more than welcome to. Um, well, again, from doing this in the past, right? So I've taken a system that was going very slow. The request time was somewhere like 5 to 6 seconds. And taken that down to quarter second response times. It's a good feeling, but it's a lot of work. So with that application, what I did is first spent months just understanding how the system worked, then took what they'd broken down. They'd had created services, but I took those services and simplified them by their dependencies. So if a class had, I'm going to use LinkPad rather than opening up another. Um, so if a class, so we had a public class widget service, right? And it had public widget service. And it had um, repository X, I repository Y, repository 2, right, and others. What I'd do is I'd try and figure out which methods in here used what repositories. And I'd then create a new service that focused on that repository so that I minimize the amount of dependencies injected, right? So we created repository X service, right? Well, obviously naming is protected, yeah, but this now has only a single focus, and the methods that it's dealing with only deal with that thing. It's not a perfect alignment because you could end up with um, a couple of repositories for one, but no joke, these sorts of services had maybe 6 or 10 injected dependencies. So breaking them up was possible. So what I did is I kind of designed out, refactored, but as I refactored these test cases, I actually created unit tests around them to validate. Well, it's a gradual step towards, it's not a final solution. What it is okay, well, I've got all these dependencies. How do I unit test the system, right? How do I identify I've made effective fixes? So what you do is you write these extra services that live alongside the existing code, and you take a gradual refactoring step of, okay, let's move this behavior. Then you can move it over to the new class once you're confident it's working properly, and delete the old code. So this service eventually gets smaller and smaller to the point it's gone. And you've created more services, but you've added unit testing at the same time. So you strengthen the code base um, to then move it forward, right? So now you've got a testable system that is a little cleaner. You understand a little better. You've refactored out bad code. You've refactored out dead code in that because you've actually moved that step forward. Your system might not have got faster, but what you now have is more maintainability. And more maintainability means you can make changes quicker in and have more confidence in those changes, which means that now when you start to make the improvements to the speed, and some of this might make improvements to speed, right? One of the things we identified was we were using a dependency injection framework, which was adding over, what was it, a second and a half of latency. So we spent a weekend and replaced the dependency injection service and cut a second and a half. Say the repository is user details repository, user groups repository, user custom repository, right? It should just be a single repository, should it? I mean, I use the word repository here, but yeah. But again, if you've got that in a single repository and they're doing all sorts of different things, why should that be a single repository or a single, let's say, service? Let's align with the service. Again, it's more about breaking up to me, when you've got a monolith that is, if you've got requests that went from 3 to 15 seconds, then you need to break that monolith up a little bit. And breaking it up by, no, about it, maybe in the long term, but you need to make an interim change that isn't mass rewrite or mass refactoring. You need to make a step change to that code base to make sure that you're not, especially if it's fully in production and users are using it on a daily basis. You need to make sure that what you do moves the system forward while still allowing you to make changes and fixes to that code as you go. Cutting out the redundant code. This allows you also, if you've not got a lot of experience with the system or you've got inexperience in the system, this refactoring effort also allows a growth of a sharing of the understanding of the system so that you can actually understand why you're doing the method. You might find, oh, we don't do that anymore. Let's remove that. Okay. You've cleaned up the code. You've removed some pieces. So it's more that step towards breaking that out. So what I did is we had these massive services that were kind of like, let's avoid the, I can't really avoid the repository thing, but I was working in the background and then caught my attention with a similar problem we have. So let's say you have a service and it has a half a dozen or more dependencies, right? Right. And let's say there's 3,000 lines of code, um, and it's split across, let's say, 40 to 50 methods, right? This code file is unmaintainable. It's a challenge. How do you move towards a better architecture, right? How do you move away from this without actually breaking the system while also improving the system? So what I did is I identified a single dependency that seemed, just because some of these, when you're working with these sorts of services, right, people will dump, again, it's my problem with controllers all over again. Once you put a service there, so in your example, right, let's say that was user service, right? Everything that's involved in service, everything that's involved with the user, they would put in that repository, in that service, right? So that's great because everything's in user, but now you've got this unmaintainable, challenging refactoring. Unit testing is hard because you've got a lot of dependencies, so it's like it's too slow to unit test because you've now got to develop all these, and some of these aren't by the way, some of these are um actual implementation, right? So you've got this, maybe, I can't think of a better word of repository, but ultimately I'm just trying to indicate that there are, actually, let's do this. Let's remove the word of repository, right? I have column edit, I do. Let's remove the word repository from there. Let's just get rid of repository for now, right? They align with something. They are associated with something. Maybe they're interrelated. Maybe they're not, right? It's more about, it's more about the fact there's a lot of dependencies, and this file has, let's say around 3,000 lines. It's got 40 to 50 methods. If you want to refactor this, or you want to fix this, you can't just delete it and start again, right? There's a lot of business logic in here. There's a lot of stuff in here. This is my experience, right? I've done this thing. So what I did is I identified the methods that revolved around certain dependencies, right? And if I identified it, I started simple. If I identified a bunch of methods that only dealt with one dependency, I broke that out as a service, right? So I broke that out to its own, let's say, dependency X service. right? And then what I did is I took those methods that were in dependency X service and I added a unit test for the method and then put the method in there bit by bit and validated the behavior. So I was not only was I documenting the system at the same time, I was gaining an understanding of how the system was actually doing its job as I built a new service that was now unit testable. Right. One way of dealing with that is the methods that then were invoked in here to make sure you don't break the rest of the system. You can now make those methods point directly to dependency X service. So you replace this with dependency X service for temporarily. The end state is obvious in that what we want user service with maybe 3 of the maximum dependency injected. Yeah, you're aiming towards cutting it down and cleaning the code as you go. It's a refactoring step that allows you to move towards more unit testing, and therefore you can make better changes and still have confidence the system's working. So if you've got a system that's lost, a lot of performance, you might be able to identify some of those things through this exercise, but if nothing else, you'll be able to remove the dead code while strengthening the system. And now you know that making future changes is easier. What I went to from here was more CQRS, right? So I moved away from this, and then these methods that were now testable, they were definable, when they had just do random thing, right? If these weren't actually related methods, like they were just kind of generally doing the thing on the dependency, I then made them a command and made their tests independent. So I was again whittling down the system and making it cleaner. So it's making a dependency W that contains dependency X, Y, Z in line to make sense. Then eventually get rid of its really dependencies. Yeah, I mean, any marked reduction, yeah, it does get a bit worse because you end up with more code. You end up with more possible pieces. But again, in a system that you don't fully understand, you gain understanding, you gain confidence because you're adding unit tests as you go. And, yes, the performance doesn't come immediately, but you might actually identify performance things through doing that, right? You might identify, oh, we're never cleaning this list up, because you might actually we did have an instance where, this method here was inserting items into a list that was global, right? And this was set as a singleton, etc. So it was just keeping a load of memory just locked everywhere, and never cleaning it up. Basically, I'm proposing you make a dependency W that contains the methods of the 3 dependencies listed. So instead of 3 files with lot, you'd end up with 1 file with 3 K lines. Well, that's okay. So yeah, you do get worse because you've got to. But again, if you're trying to unit test, the more dependencies you put in, the harder it is to unit test, right? It's much easier to test this with a mockable dependency. This was a whole different challenge because we had to create the mockable instances of these to make this work. But oh, I'm not saying that we're not, but what I'm saying is you're moving towards testing it. You're making it testable, and making it testable means that it's less intimidating to add tests as you go. So that's the approach I took. And we got the application down from, it was taking, anywhere from, 3 to 10 seconds per request. By the time we got the system launched in 9 months, the new system, well, the interim system cut the request time down by 50%. So we got down to 1.5 to like 4 seconds overall. Then we rewrote it in the next 9 months. So we took 6 months to refactor it, and then we rewrote it. But we're able to, because we'd broken the system down like this, we were able to better understand how that worked. So we actually could do a rewrite because we understood the system. So it's not just about making the code better. It's about making the developers, allowing the developers to understand what they're doing and how they're implementing things and being able to test it and have confidence in making changes. So we reduced support load down from, we were like 30 to 40 hours a week on support down to 1 hour a week at most by the time we'd gone through the refactoring. So we improved performance, we cut down is what you're saying there similar to what I'm saying? Similar. Again, if you've got a large service that is pulling things together, and again, I'm making assumptions here. Gilgamesh hasn't joined in that conversation at all, but that's how I would approach that, right? That's how I tackle, or how I have tackled that in the past. Hi, Emporium guy, how you doing? Each system's different. If you identify the database as the challenge, maybe the code you're writing against the database is poor, and you can do some refactoring there. So your method is to make a cleaner service and then slowly whittle away the old mess. Yes, I would chip away at the old service and break down into new services. And yeah, it might be that you create a user service and a user, as to your point, user details service and a user group service, right? But you're trying to solve a lot of things at once, right? If the system's kind of grown up, and see, my perception is the problem is in the repositories first, then the service. No, not necessarily. And again, that's why I relabeled them as dependencies, because it wasn't all just repositories. It wasn't that pattern. It was somewhat that pattern, which is why I went there first. But it was more, again, these were not interrelated either. But the morning is good. Morning's going well so far. We're talking about refactoring large code bases. Um, but oftentimes what happens is you're building a system and someone comes and asks for a request and you implement that code, or you just, oh yeah, especially when you've got this, right? The developer is not going to think about the right design. They're going to think about how to get it into this design, right? So if I go and get asked, oh, we need to send an email when the user adds a new widget on the screen, right? The Most developers are going to go, oh, okay, there you go. We'll add a new method in here and it will, oh, we need to get the email service. So we need to inject the email service, right? Because I know how to do this. It's fine. Right. So they'll go there, they'll add email service and say, okay, well, you know, if send email, right? Email, right? And now this method grew by a dozen lines and whatever. Well, yeah, because to do what you're proposing would take forever. I've only got 5 story points after all to do this story. If this is if they're trying to say that you have to fit this in story points, you take one dependency and pull it out, and that's your stories. And if there's like, well, that doesn't give user value. No, but it gives developer value, right? And again, this is my whole, I don't like aligning to that. It has to have user value. If the system's better because the developers understand it better and they can fix it and they can maintain it better, there's user value because your developers are quicker. You can think of it more easily as a single large redesign. It's a gradual redesign though. But it'd be better to redesign as you push. Why would it be better to redesign as you push features out? Again, developers are more inclined to do this. If you're adding a new feature, okay, we kind of got into this conversation a little bit yesterday with the Emporium guy in Discord call. A lot of developers wanting to get the job done. They don't want to spend a lot of time doing things that could be risky if they don't understand how to do it, right? So unit testing is a challenge. It's a thing that developers need to be taught and they need to be kept accountable for by the team, not by the management. The management, like big hammer, doesn't encourage developers to unit test. It encourages developers to cheat and do the quickest thing. The redesign like this needs decisions by the team on how to approach it. Yeah. Where's your please log? Oh yeah, true. I need to. Yeah, we need to add the essential logging, right? And that's what I'm saying. There was a pattern. There's a style. There's a methodology to this, right? It's a okay. Let's take down you take the what's the word, the low hanging fruit first. You say okay, well let's identify by just looking through the code which methods use this dependency. Okay, X Y Z. Are there any other dependencies used there? Spikes would make sense. Spikes for the identification, yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm just sharing. I have done this, right? I'm not talking from a place of just making this up as I go along. I have done this without reading the book on refactoring monoliths or whatever, right? I did this off my own uh, thought, right? This is how I approached this challenge, and it worked. It got us to the point where the code maintenance went up, the support requests went down, and the time to change went up. That's why I was asking if opinions were matching real world experiences. Yes. Well, that's why I was asking if my opinions were matching real world experience. Yeah. So very dependent in all community systems, probably very common. Oh, for the type series, yeah. Hey Apex, how you doing? Good morning. So we're just talking about refactoring, and I'm deciding without Gilgamesh joining in much of the conversation. I've decided that Gilgamesh has got this massive system that's completely unmaintainable, and not actually asked anything about what what Gilgamesh actually did as to the challenges they're facing. So we're talking about how I'm designing the code is actually how this started. Okay, what I'm building today. Oh yeah, I forgot my daily GitHub Copilot update. It's I'm trying to get the user invitation stuff working, but this is a useful conversation that is worthy of the distraction. um, yeah, so we did some diagramming to start. Like this is the process kind of as it stands right this second for single request. Anyway, anyhow, great discussion. I'm very interested in solving the hypothetical problem you proposed. Yeah, it's if you look at your system and see this sort of stuff, it's scary. And what you've got to do is figure out how again what's the word what's the phrase um how do you eat an elephant, that phrase. um it's one bite at a time, right? It's big, but is that the phrase? Am I just making that up? The only way to eat an elephant, one bite at a time. Yeah, it is the phrase. I'm not just going crazy. um Also, say that the service requires 3 dependencies to do that method. You move it into that service, then whittle it down to a single dependency. Or as few depend as you whittling it down to manageable dependencies. That's really what the goal is. It doesn't matter if you end up with if you can't, like, you don't want to keep biting and biting and biting and biting and biting and lowering it and lowering it and lowering it. What you want to do is say, okay, well, again, I took the first scenario where these were simple. There was, let's say there's 10 methods that just use this one, right? And there's 5 methods that use this one and this one, So if there's 5 methods that use these 2 dependencies, pull those 2 dependencies out, right? And make that a dependency, a public class, do another thing service. And this would be, I dependency y, and it's more about moving it to a place of, can I maintain this and can I clean this up? And just breaking down the system. And again, you increase developer knowledge, you increase maintainability, you lower the time to make change, and yes, you may gain some performance because you may remove redundant methods. You may be able to use during the unit testing, identify weaknesses or inefficiencies. So you are potentially improving things, but overall, your code base can now change quicker, so your time to fixes is quicker. It doesn't have to be a single dependency. You can have multiple but manageable as a kid. Right. So it's biting it off as much as you can. In this instance, there was a single controller. So what I did is the interim step again is, what you do is you go, okay, well, let's change. So the user service becomes, we now need, we replace that with that, right? And we replace those two with that one, right? And now the methods that previously were in here, they invoke those things. So now you don't break the interface for this. This still functions for the rest of the system. So any places in the code using it are still functional, right? You don't go up the chain with this. So you still this is the interface that the system is working with. The system stays intact. But many endpoints, the problem is that service has a ton of responsibility. Yeah, and the likelihood is, if it's this big, then there's the other problem, right? There's probably a controller with 800 lines, right? That's not for you to worry about now. That's a later refactoring. But again, now you understand the methods that are being called, you understand the dependencies, you understand. You might find that there's a ton of public methods in here, and modern IDEs make this a lot easier. Right, just trying to, yeah, no worries. Modern IDs make this a lot easier because they do they indicate to you, I mean, to some extent, like usages. This was not a tool that I had 10 years ago when I started this. Well, I did. It existed. It's not like it didn't exist. It's just not as it was, the IDE wouldn't grey it out or whatever. Visual Studio was still pretty slow for that sort of stuff. You need to resharper, and on a code base like this that I'm talking about, resharper just cried. We have a project in our main code base that will probably delete a third to half the code once that completes. Maybe I'll tackle something like this. It's worth doing, especially in a code base that you aren't fully familiar with. Right? Because if you're moving towards that future, because we would all love to say, rebuild it, build it again. But the problem, 2 things happen when you rebuild a code base, when you do a greenfield project that's building, well, not a greenfield, this is brownfield, but I think brownfield's the right term here. Yeah, brownfield, replacing an existing system, right? Um, um, not in the mood. Um, not a place to ask. um, yeah, so if you're building a system and um, I've lost my train of thought completely there. Yeah, brownfield development is the act of replacing a system in place, right? Um, you don't get doing a rewrite is a nice idea, but you miss a lot of the behavior if you haven't actually been responsible for the original development and you haven't learned all the lessons that came from the initial release to the current point. You don't understand why decisions have been made, so you don't understand how the system is working. You don't understand those quirks. Doing something like this, pulling it apart and refactoring it and building unit tests around it, allow you to ask some of the questions that you didn't get the first time or when you were maintaining the code. So it is a useful exercise to move forward. It's a hard one to validate to the business if you actually need to take a little bit of time. But like I said, we identified the dependency injection framework was slow. We identified we needed to replace that. So we actually did some work to replace it and we got the speed massively improved. We got the number of exceptions being thrown down considerably, which sped the code up. There was side effects that weren't necessarily deliberate, but they were intentional when we got there. So this refactoring exercise is useful if you're trying to build a new system on top of an existing system. Refactor what's there, make it better. Come up with some methods of how you pull that apart and do it. It doesn't have to follow this necessarily, but it's more pulling it apart and understanding the pieces. No, it's a big jigsaw. Right? But you've got to have confidence. And the problem is that, like I said, developers aren't always keen to do this sort of stuff because it's scary. So you need some patterns, you need some agreed methods, and you need to make sure your code reviews are solid and that they're not building. You don't want to build this service with 3,000 lines of its own code. This might be 1,000 lines, but it's 1,000 lines you now understand better, and you can pull out into individual methods if you need to and refactor it and have unit tests to back you up doing it. I'd probably do some spikes on the weekend to figure out if I had a path forward. Much as I'd love to have that worked out at work initially, I don't think I can. Yeah, don't do weekend spikes. Some people are just that dedicated. So Gilgamesh, if you're still around, I do hope this is in some way insightful. Um, it's a great conversation regardless, but I hope it is in some ways insightful for you. Um, yeah, different points in our career. No, nope. um, no, this is based on real world experience. This is actually based upon having done this. But yeah, I just hope it's insightful enough to because we started off by like looking at the actual system and how it's broken down and how I'm deciding. My streaming lately made me realize I'm more focused on my task than chat than you are. Not sure I could change that. That's fine. I mean I have identified that I do definitely have some attention problems, right? Um, but I enjoy the conversation. I enjoy talking with people who care about this stuff, and it kind of it fills that need for me as well. So, and by talking about it, I actually stay more motivated. So when I don't stream, I can sit down and do this as well, which is helping me a lot. So I'm mostly here for the conversation as well. Yeah, because the code's terrible. I've been learning to pick my battles as well. Tried to suggest new improvements everywhere for too long. Hi, Magnetonics. How you doing? You mean suggesting like working in code bases that exist, working in existing code bases that you have no control, and definitely is frustrating at times. It's worth trying to make change. It's worth trying to suggest change, and you know, when you have the option to show techniques and practices that might help that, I would do it. Pretty good. Just stopping in for a bit before I leave for work. What's the goal for today? So the goal for today is I am trying to get this user invitation system working. So this is my large application. I've been trying to get this workflow figured out for the last couple of days. Um, and what I'm trying to do is get this to happen. So I'm writing some unit tests around that behavior right this second. Well, after having a fun conversation about refactoring code bases. So, um, um, Magnetonics is a streamer, by the way, the game dev, worth a follow. I was actually looking in the stream the other day. I just went up. I just didn't get to say hi. What time? Look on Dota. Thank you very much. Thank you for the engagement. I do appreciate talking about this stuff. Um, it is fun. So what I'm trying to implement is basically what happens is when I want to onboard a new user to my system, I use Auth0. Auth0 requires me to set a password, so I can't have my tenant manager, the administrator, just go in and say add a user and then automatically add it to Auth0. What I need to do is create all the records necessary in the system for that user and then send them an invitation that they can then click a link to. And when they get that link, they'll be presented with a screen to set a password, and that will complete the process and register them with Auth0. Yeah, an invite system is something I don't have a clue about yet. um, no worries. So we have this path kind of I've gone I've gone through many iterations of this in the last couple of days because um the way Auth0 works is it doesn't give you any ability to send out an invite specifically. It can create a set password ticket, which allows you to do this part. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to break it so that this does nothing with Auth0. Right now, when I create an extra user, it does this part. I'm going to remove that part and just do the create invitation so that when the user completes this invitation, then it registers with Auth0. That does allow me to know that that user definitely confirmed. So I don't need to create this in any state other than confirmed, right? So this is definitely a verified user by the fact that they've done this process. So we're just writing some unit tests around what I expect to see. So we're going here now. This should fail. Expected to receive a call, didn't receive it. So now let's go into the command. Let's do this. So repository dot add async. Oh no, we need to create a user var invitation. And we kind of went through this yesterday in that I'm not going to validate the user exists in here because the assumption, and it should be a safe assumption, is that the user should exist to get into this method. If the user doesn't exist, this would still create an invitation. It would just be an invalid join. I'm not building that. If I build that in as a test to say if the user exists and I validate that, then I'm telling the reader of that code the user might not exist. And I don't like to be that defensive. So I'm going to avoid doing that until I have a good reason to do it. So we're going to do request.user ID, request.invited by user ID, and then date time UTC now. Add days. We're going to hard code this for right a second. I think that should probably be a configuration. You got 7 days to accept an invitation. So that creates a user invitation, and then we're going to add it to the repository. And there we go. Let's run that unit test. No. Oh, buddy. Got a friend coming to see me. Got 2 friends coming to see me. Awesome. One day maybe I'll set dog cam up. So that fails because I'm not setting a code. I need some way of configuring a code. How do we do this for? We did this somewhere else. Was it password or was it, there was something we generated randomly. Where was that? Oh, I know where it was. So on the stream, from time to time, we do some projects that are community focused. What about a case where the IT admin preps their accounts a month out? I don't know that case exists yet. Yeah, I could run away with that idea, right? I could over engineer the heck out of that and just be like, oh well, what if this and what if that? All I'm doing right now is just picking something simple to move on. Later on, when I need to configure it, we'll add the configuration in. You know, it's just about being pragmatic about, okay, well, I don't need that right this second, so therefore let's just move on and do the basic stuff. So we had a method in water drink water. So for those that haven't seen this, water drink water is an application that we developed on stream that is fully available. It's a simple application built to track water consumption. We built it with a very simple design with some deliberately simplistic techniques so that it could be used to demonstrate or tinker with or whatever. So if we need an application to reference, to talk about, then this is kind of the application because it's all shared. My main application is a bit too big to just talk about randomly. I think we had a method in here of hash password. So this took a hash password delegate. Infrastructure. I only thought of it because I just finished setting up a new hires accounts. Granted, it was a 7-day window. But yeah, but that's an experience, right? That's an experience of that. So if you were setting up, let's say you were setting up this system and you wanted to give users the ability to add requests into the system, which is something as well that I do have in the long term. I want kind of a user voice style thing. Then you might want to do that. You might want to say, okay, onboard my entire organization and give them a month or whatever. Or we're creating this group. Let's set them up now. You might do that, but the idea, what you don't want to do is when you're designing software, you do want to do Yagni as much as you can, because if you think of every line of code you write as telling a story, and I know I've said this before, then every line of code you write that you think you might need is a potential lie in your story, right? Um, so you want to make sure that you're just writing the code that you need at the time you need it, and not running away with, because again, you can think through all the requirements. Um, what do you do? What do you do? Oi, Chompy, stop. It's a tape or waterfall size, yeah. Um, and it's why, as a developer, your job is not just to write code. Your job, and I think I kind of put it in the Discord last week, right? Um, your job is to protect the product and build the product that you know you need to build. I've got two little friends that want to sit that kind of requesting attention, which is, come on, calm down. Let's sit down, guys. Come on. Yeah. So your job is to look after the software and make sure that um, it's doing what it needs to do, and that you're not running away with things. So it's not just to sit down and write the code. It's to say, hey, we don't do that, or no, we shouldn't do that because this would break this, and make sure you're safeguarding the future of the application as much as you can, and make sure you're only doing the requirements that you actually have, and not trying to plan for that future. Plan for the ability to have the future is what I'm saying. I'm not saying write only the code that you know you need to write and then just don't change it. You got to be willing to change it, but it's easy to change after the fact. So what I'm going to do here, what I'm procrastinating this is iCode generator. I think that might be. I think we might have swapped it with that. I actually kind of like this idea. API. So what we do here is we set up a delegate. Where are you? Oh, you're here somewhere. Here you go. So, get account. Password is new password, and that's actually a delegate that matches that pattern. So we don't have to create a class or a service or anything like that to test that there. Password itself, um, this is testable because I can just pass a different method in and give it a known quantity every time. This is what I'm considering doing here. So rather than inject a, um, you know, I code generator service, right? I just inject a method that returns, right? And then when I'm doing DI configuration, I set up when you ask for this delegate, that's what you get. So if it's actually a dependency injection thing, I can actually create that service and not, this doesn't need to know about the service. It just needs to know, here's how I get a code. I'm tempted to do that here. was trying to think through the how I would do that properly. In this instance, I created a password class. And that password class actually has, given a string, it's going to generate if you give it a string, what's the value there? Oh yeah, we just set the value. So yeah, if you give it a string, that's the actual password, or that's the actual string. Forget how I use it. Yes. Yeah, it'll give you the password of that string. Yeah, so that's what it is. And actually, yeah, and it's private then. So you pass it in, you can't get it back out. It's completely unchangeable. You can only get the actual password back out. So that allows me to, if I use that method, that allows me to yeah, I think we will do that. So it's basically just a delegate of string. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to declare this probably doesn't live in the right place. This is public delegate string um, invitation code delegate, right? And then that is passed in, right? Code delegate, the explicit there. And then in our create here, we also need to pass the code in. So we need string code. It's a code in the user invitation. I'm not going to name it invitation code. This matters because it's invited by, but everything else is relative to this thing. I don't need to specify what code means. I shouldn't need to specify what code means in here. So code equals code, and we pass in the code. This private constructor prevents me from creating an instance of this on the fly. I have to go through this thing, and the reason being, and I'll show you in a second, this needs to publish an event. If you do it in the constructor, then every time you create an instance of this through the normal, because Entity Framework will still construct this because it'll populate the other properties. So it can be used as an object on this. But if I do it with a public constructor, if someone comes along and says, "Oh, I want to create a new user invitation," that this behavior is not ideal. So it's more of an explicit create. I control all the properties. So here, what I'll do is that, right? And that should allow me, when I do in here now, I should be able to do code delegate. And now that should run. Yeah, why didn't you run? User ID invited by, invited user ID, invited by user ID. Received a user invitation. Did it receive anything? Let's have a look. It's meant to receive a call matching. Actually received no matching calls. Received one non-matching call with non-matching arguments indicated. So it did receive a call. It did receive an add async. So what did I screw up there? That's I do agree with Dota that having to debug unit tests suggests you have a little bit of an issue, but user ID, invited by user ID. So delegate returns code. Doing it this way allows me to defer how I actually figure that out. So I can, if I want a service or I want some sort of just simple algorithm, I can set that up when I set up the DI stuff. So if we have 10 that, what does our invitation look like? Code is null. Well, that'd be why. Yeah, that'd be why. I know how to recode, it's fine. So there's a use case here that I definitely know will exist where the user doesn't actually claim the invitation expires, which means that we need to reissue the invitation, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be an explicit action, like re-invite user, because there's nothing extra to do. There's just to create the invitation, right? So let's do when creating invitation and invitation, expired invitation exists. So again, I'm documenting this as part of the system, right? I'm saying this can happen. Invitation is added. Um, do I want to do that? So my user invitations table has an expiration. Actually, and let's start with the, actually, invitation is added. So essentially this is the same thing. Actually, let's write what I'm trying to think about is the actual thing that I will be able to test, because I want to write an expired invitation exists, and I want to write when creating invitation and expire and non-expired invitation exists, right? In this case, invitation is updated, right? If I write one of these tests first, it's going to make no sense because it's just going to work, right? Without, if I just copy this code in here, because ultimately, this is invitation is created, right? And I want another test, and this is going to help actually. invitation event is user invitation created event is queued. So we need to have a public, a private, well, private, proof, no stream today. Apparently there's a company happy hour. Wow, priorities. Ah, you're going to schmooze with your colleagues instead of getting home and sitting alone on a computer talking to strangers. Gee, I don't know. So our result here is actually this. And what we want to validate is result dot domain events dot of type dot count. Actually, any oh, now you write it for me. So we want to publish free food is free food. Priorities. I don't get it. That's cool. One of the challenges of not um of working fully from home is you don't get to socialize. Well, that being said, in September I'm going to disappear for 3 days. My first offsite or on-site. So what I need to do, so I'm going to publish an event, right? So the domain events are the side effects, and this is why this feels correct from a behavioral standpoint of the system, but it feels a little bit like magic because obviously there's a side effect to me doing this. So by creating the user invitation, I'm going to queue an event. That event is going to then be responded to. I'm going to write the response part of that, which is then going to send the email. It means that I guarantee that the stuff is in the database before I actually handle that, which is good. Um, yeah, I've got a feeling I'm going to end up with a lot more stuff like this, but invited by user ID, event.code. Um, actually, what about Varney here? Let's go with that for this second. We're going to go down to our domain. Our domain has domain events, right? And this is user invitation created. And they look like this, right? Queued. My domain event. I still like creating multiple classes. Considering they're mostly like this, I probably could put them in one class. I could essentially put them in the entities, right? I could actually put them at the top of the entities, the events that it publishes. I can declare them there. Not sure I would. I kind of like the explicit feel to look at. So now let's do that. And I'm like, what do I want to do here? What do I want to validate? Ah, invitation ID equals result dot identifier. That's what it should be. Is it, you know, count 0. What do you like about that? Any is true. There you go. That looks better. So a user invitation was created. Right. That's this. This is the path I'm going down. Again, if you're new to the stream, if you're or not, if you have any questions, thoughts, opinions on what I'm doing, you're more than welcome to ask. I'm more than happy to divert and show a piece of this off. I can't really show the system right now because it's kind of broken and on the floor, but this piece kind of needs to happen. So basically what's going to happen now is we're going to go to our user invitation. When we create the user invitation, we're going to do domain add domain event. Is it? Forgotten how my code works. Yeah, add domain event. Okay. Add domain event. New user invitation created. And that's going to take so for some reason I cannot spell this word. Driving me invitation. Log. You good? What he heard. He's being grumpy. Add domain event. Oh, yeah, that's why. Forward static. That's to go there. Will that work? Guess we'll find out. Yeah, it constructs the parent first, so it should definitely work out. Then how have I done this in the past then? Associate user with tenant. Again, tenant user create. That's how. Okay, I see it now. Immediately. Yeah, it shouldn't go there because that if we provide a constructor, yeah, var result equals that. They do result dot add domain event because now we're inside of the class, so it's fine. Result identifier and then return result. Okay, there we go. That's how we do it. That's the pattern. It's been months since I actually wrote that sort of code. Okay, so now the problem there is not one of it's failing. It's that just prompted me to think about how I was doing that. I'm actually not capturing that result. So what I do now is say repository dot when r goes to r dot r dot is dot any user invitation, because again we're not being specific here. R dot any cancellation token dot do. Did I miss a parenthesis? Yes, I did. Dot do info goes to result equals info.arg user invitation. So the reason I don't want to simplify this or specify this in any way is because if I call it with the wrong invitation for whatever reason, I want to make sure that this still fails. So whatever I get, I'm going to set into that. So the last one of those I get is the one I'm testing. It does leave some holes, but it should work. So if I change the code and change how I add this user invitation, then this event might not fire or something. And now the event's not there, but I have captured the result to validate. Okay, so that test passes. So we have an event publishing. Now, this is a little bit repetitive, a little bit slow to get to where I need to go, because obviously right now I could take that code, I could go and do the React part of it, I could do the listening to the event and sending the email. I'm just trying to take my time and make sure this is thought through enough that it documents out how the system's going to behave, and that way I'm not making a mess for later, right? It's going to take overall, without me talking about it and chatting about it, it's only going to take me an hour or so to get this worked on and done. So in the case of an invitation existing, I still need to publish the event. So user invitation, how did I turn that then? I want to make sure I'm trying to be consistent. User invitation. So do I want to queue a new event, a user invitation updated event, or whatever? I don't think it's going to matter because I need the invitation create. Essentially, I'm saying the invitation is being recreated. I'm extending the invitation again. So I could actually remove the created word from that, right? I could actually use an invitation extended, right? But again, that comes with other words. So I'm going to leave created in there for right this second, but that event doesn't necessarily need to react. It doesn't need to be a direct alignment with the act of creating it in the database, and that's something that you need to kind of consider. Is I'm trying to represent the system, not the technology. So this might not be the cleanest thing to do, but ultimately I want to do the same thing, right? I want to say, okay, the user invitation create event is queued. I want to make sure that actually gets triggered even on an update. And now I'm documenting that should happen. On this test, an invitation should still be added. And I should still see an event, right? A bit redundant. I'm seeing the same code over and over again, but yeah. So I'm going to save a bit of time here and get this moving forward, rather than just chatting my way through it. So the key difference here is this is going to be update async. And I want to test, yep. And result dot last updated. That should, no, is to do it. Where's my, so my extent, I don't like the word should in tests. Is within, yeah, is within. Is not null. Result dot last updated is within. Why is that? is not null. This date time actual cannot resolve. But that's there. How do you not have is within? That's a date time. And I'm making it a date time. Is it just because it is a... Well, that won't let me do that, will it? It's almost the exact same. I suppose. If actual is null, return new, return cert dot, what would I wait here? Ah, that's why, because I returned date time assertion there. Oh, right then. Mm, 1 second should do. That's when I validated the last update is set on it. And again, that this is going to look exactly the same because I do want the invite to go. So now the difference, this is going to fail. Right? It didn't see the calls it expected because it doesn't exist. Non-expired. So I need to set up repository dot when r goes to r dot first default arg dot is, what would this be, is any high specification user interface dot, actually no, it's just this dot returns. So one of the challenges is if you go with something like I've done here, right? When I've got this user invitation create, I've created a private constructor. What that does mean is I don't get to create, I can't create one of these on the fly because then I'll create domain events, etc. I need to create an instance of this like it exists in the database without any side effects. So what I've got for this is an object builder, which is a custom class, which basically gives me the ability to say like instantiate an object using reflection and set the values of it. So it'll figure out the dependencies. So I can set the user ID equals to user ID, invited user ID, invited by, expiration is actually, yeah, it doesn't matter what the expiration is because it's non-expired. Code is code. last updated is null. Actually, I don't need to set last updated. It'll stay the same. Identifier equals, actually, that I wanted to control private period. I want to validate that the GUI that I generate, the event that I fire is for, I'm about to drop for work. Thank you for the stream. Apex, thank you very much for coming and hanging out. It is always solid. Appreciate it, dude. You getting back to streaming anytime soon? I hope. Now you've got your computer sorted. Sorry for the mic stuff. Just wiggling the mic around. Fancy, got the PC sorted. Nice. Well, look forward to it. Let's see. Apex Pixelated is a game developer developing some really cool stuff on stream, working in unit tests with Godot, which is fascinating to watch. Thank you and enjoy your day. You too. Take care. Having spent some time in Godot now, those unit tests are even more incredible to see. So I got to build the object out, the basics. This should be fine. This will create an instance of this object and give me back the object. And the benefit there is, well, I'm not just expecting the result, right? I'm expecting this to be the same as this. So it should all match. We're going to capture the result when we do the update, and that identifier should be the same as our invitation event should be that, and event dot equals that. Right. There should be one in the same, but not necessarily. TBD, how goes it? Goes well, Cataton office. How you doing? Welcome in. See, not too late in the day. Doing well, got back from work and all. Nice. Nice. Let's run these tests. Expect to receive call. So now we're not receiving the calls because we haven't changed the code. So that's actually a legitimate failure. So how's that going? Any considerable progress? Worth time for me. Thanks for stream. Mojo, thank you very much. Have a great day. Enjoy your schmoozing. And catch you later. Dev's going pretty good today. We've had a bit of discussion, so it's slowed me down a little bit, but that's okay on this stream. I don't mind chatting about the code as much as doing the code. What I'm working on right now is a user invitation component. So the system I'm building is I term it as an agile project management platform or a work tracking platform, whatever. My focus is on building a system that is built to gather requirements effectively for developers without actually having to involve developers all the time. We used to just chat in dev streams from Center. No worries. I don't have any entertaining bots though, sadly. I just kind of talk about the code. So what I'm building is a distributed system based around Kafka and Service Bus. And basically I am breaking down the system into components, and these components they trigger events fire, they get picked up by Kafka, and other things consume them, so changes and the view, etc. Using a lot of different technology in this piece. Um, and right now, what I'm working on is when we want to add a new user to the system, we need to send them an invite. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm figuring out right this second. Is this piece? Oh. So yeah, thank you for the look. Hope you're well. Um, I assume you came in with the raid at the beginning of the stream, being that you would normally be in Grumpy's stream. But I appreciate it. So basically, if you have any questions about what I'm doing, if you have any interest in learning more about the technologies I'm using, it is okay to ask. It's okay to talk about it. I'm not going to like ignore a question and focus on the code. I am in somewhat of a rush to get this done. I want to complete it this side of my 60s, but I don't mind talking about technology and trying to share my methods here. Speedrun any percentage. So if you have questions, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter. They don't have to be advanced questions. They don't have to be. If if you want if you want me to look at specific code, I can look at specific code. I don't mind people learning from this. I do have projects that are more um, approachable uh, to share if people are interested in that as well. Um, yeah, if you're interested, there is another project to do work on the stream. I haven't worked on it in quite a while because it kind of stagnated a little bit from the interest perspective, but it is a little simpler of a project to look at and to kind of ask questions about and not necessarily learn. I wouldn't say it's necessarily great for learning, but it is more approachable if you wanted to contribute to an open source project and learn about how to do pull requests and do that. This is a repository built for allowing you to do that. I think I'll just listen to you talking while trying to figure out how to get what it is to do what I wanted to do. No worries, no worries. I'm not trying to push the questions. I'm just making sure that I offer the invitation. And I do have to finish up soon because my workday starts. It's always an open invitation as well for anyone joining the stream. I don't mind talking about the code. I think it's important to share. ASMR when you don't want me doing ASMR. So in here now, what I want to do is I want to validate that invitation exists. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the repository and we're going to do first the default async. And this is going to be a new. And I don't actually have enough. So I need a specification specifically for this. This is why I get into. So that needs to go there. And we need invitation by user ID spec. It's actually open invitation by user ID spec. Because I actually only care about there being an actual open invitation. So this is query.where I goes to I dot user ID equals ID and I dot expiration date is greater than date time UTC now. Unfortunately, there's no good testing method around specs, which is the big downside here. So I can't necessarily test that I'm using that specific specification. Because I can't test the arguments into it. So I can't validate that specification. I could do here, I could do like this one here. I could do that. This is a that I use an open invitation by user ID spec. I can validate that. So with that in place, if existing is not null, if it's null, then we're going to do that. I'll secure wait it. Else. Do I prefer? Is that normal? Do I prefer that? I think I prefer that. So what we're going to do is we need to generate new code. Actually, that's a good point. That's really just helped me. One day I will figure out how to refactor what I'm calling the entity into the aggregate or kind of the concept of the aggregate. An invitation is a standalone thing. But the problem here is, yeah. So public void, it's not just update the code, it's refresh invitation. We don't want them to come in on that previous code. If they click the original email link, we want them to come in again. So this is going to be code equals code. Last updated is date time now. There's no setter. Yes. I actually I don't need to worry about that. Any entity in my system that is an entity base and has last updated automatically gets the last updated set when I write it back. So I don't need to actually panic about that piece. What I do need to do is set the expiration date though. Everything is UTC. And we're creating a new invitation. Even though we're refreshing it, we're just creating a new invitation, right? And I'm doing a bit of cheat here. I'm trying to solve multiple things at once. This isn't going to work though. I can't validate that because it's an implicit component of the system. This though, existing dot refresh invitation code delegate. And if I'm testing this properly, private string expected code equals refreshed code. And then just to identify I dot code equals expected code. I can actually change that in the original as well. And if we run the test, we got the event, but we didn't match that. And the reason is that should be expected code. That says code, right? So we should be able to run that now and have it match. Yeah. So the original said code, private string, private read-only string, original code equals code. Again, in the unit test here, I'm just trying to outline the data as it stands. I'm going to get this test finished and then we'll talk about next steps. So we have the event publishing. We have the invitation has been updated. Again, the last updated, I don't need to check because it's implicit behavior in the system. And yeah, there's a few other things I need to do there. So the reason I'm doing it that way, by the way, with a method instead of having, I could just pull the invitation, etc. What this allows me to do is, and ultimately what I'll do is I'll turn around and make these, you can't just set the properties, you have to use a method to update them. What that does is that protects the actual data and allows me to say, if you change this data, even if someone creates a new handler to do something, if they touch this object in that handler to do another action, if they call the method that is going to be called, it's going to publish that event, which means the system will respond correctly in all cases. If I just allow you to check out the object, to pull out the object and change whatever fields you want to change, you are not bound by that requirement to make the event fire. So now I've got this explicit, refresh invitation. That's what I intend to do, is clear what I'm doing here. If I get an existing invitation and it's an actual open invitation, then I'm going to refresh it. What this means is this test now is pretty much the same as this, right? So this expired invitation, right? Let's just add all those dependencies in. The invitation should be created and an event should be queued, right? But I want to make sure there's already an existing one. So I need to make sure there's an existing one there. And this returns no. Default. Type of use. What? Default user invitation. Don't need type of. So that return a default object. These tests should pass, right? And it passes because I've just said if I ask for an open one, I get a null back, right? But it's being called, and this gets invoked. So I've explicitly stated that this is the workflow, which is why the unit tests help to document the behavior of the system. Right. So for anyone reading the test, right, they're going to say, okay, well, what happens when there's an expired invitation? Oh, well, an invitation should be created and an event is queued. If it's not expired, we should get an updated, but we should still see a created invitation because it's still a refreshed invitation is still an invitation, right? It creates a new invitation, and we're just validating that the code is different. Here, I do want to say that should be, we're doing that properly. Expected code is code, right? So this doesn't need to be, this needs to be I dot code equals that. And that should be expected code, right? Yeah, that still passes. So it's not perfect. There's some holes, there's some gaps along the way, but I'll find them as I go, and that's what matters the most, right? And yeah, so the next step is to react to this, right? So I've validated, okay, what happens when the invitation is expired? What happens when it's not expired? What happens when I'm creating a new invitation? That code is in a stronger position than it was before, right? We've got this path now. We've defined what an open invitation is. Our rules are there, right? What is an open invitation? And we're just going to refresh that code. If you allowed, we don't have to decide how we're going to get the code right now. We could actually feed this testable data in our dev environment, so we could actually make sure that the code is always something valid. We can swap out the implementation and we don't have to create a complex service or anything. We could just pass in a method. The way this would work in the actual setup is in tenant management. What we'd do here is we'd say, let's say we have service, we can builder.services.add transient. What would I call that? What's the delegate? Invitation code delegate. I can set that, and that can be something like that. Code, he says. I can configure it somehow. Is actually it is literally that. Right. So now that will always feed code. So I could actually do if debug. And then I can come up with a more complicated method later. If that was actually a class, I yeah, I could do that, and I'd just feed it generate code. So yeah, but that's how I'll set that up so that this works properly. But I can actually defer doing that till later. So that's just a method that's passed into call. Fetch invitation code. I cannot spell that word. Fetch invitation code. That reads a little easier from this perspective. Fetch invitation code. But okay. I'm running over a little bit because I wanted to get this done. So the next step for this is actually to create the subscription for that event, and that's when I get into the email. So tomorrow I'll start the stream with email, figuring out the email, because again I don't know whether I really want email to be a component of tenant management or I want it to be an external service, and I can publish a command to do that through the service bus. I'm thinking that way because that means that I don't want to, if let's say I do the situation that Mojo raised before, where I have an invite of like 1,000 people or 100 people or whatever, I don't want the tenant management system to become slow because it's dealing with email. I want to be able to send those commands and have an email system be able to churn through them in time and get those things done. So I don't create a dependency in the tenant management system of having to wait for emails. Challenge with that is it becomes more complicated to do, but I think the benefits are there. So yeah, we'll get the emails stuff worked on tomorrow. We'll hook it up to Papercut and make sure it can produce emails, and then we start the UI work, where we go to get the UI and add a new user. And then we kind of figure out the other side. So yeah, that's that. As always, if you're interested, if you want to talk more about this stuff, there is a Discord available if you want to join. And I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. We have actually started getting together in Discord calls there a little bit, which has been nice. I've been enjoying being able to chat with people and talk about software off stream as well. If I have time during the day or whatever, I kind of hop in there if people are in. So feel free if you're interested. And yeah, if you have questions, you want to review code or whatever, the Discord's always there. Okay, where are we going to go to? Okay, I'm gonna drop you in a co-working stream. A Monospace Mentor is streaming, and it's a good place to hang out. Super knowledgeable guy when he talks. He sounds so excited for the UI. I'm excited because I actually genuinely am excited to do that piece, because to me that's kind of, it starts to become a system. It starts to become a product that is taking shape. Once I add the users in, I get to that whole, now I've got to do the notifications piece, and every step now seems to grow a little bit more towards a feature, towards a system that actually allows me to share the vision that I have. And I am hoping, genuinely hoping, that I can encourage people to give honest feedback. Even though I've put probably now thousands of hours into this, maybe, and 10 months of my life, hundreds of hours, definitely hundreds. Um, I want to know how people feel once they start to see it take shape. So I'm excited for that UI part. It will slow me down. UI always slows me down. So yeah. Anyway, it's time for me to go to work. One line, good to see you. I'll if you also like, if you like .NET stuff, .NET streams, and also way better design work, online is also a great place to go and watch for those who haven't been there. So I'm gonna go. Thank you very much for joining me. Take care. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you again soon. Bye all. The end.